In the news this week, 30,000 cases a day not ruled out for Western Australia, as top doctors reveals the possibility. A WAMA News exclusive.
Also tonight, household fees to increase as the McGowan government offsets the rise with the electricity credit.
Pauline Hanson's election blitz in Western Australia as One Nation eyes for a seat in the Senate.
Attorney General's major interview less than 1 week before polling day, and later, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Melita Thorne.
Good evening. As the number of COVID cases spiked dramatically, Western Australia's top doctor warns that 30,000 cases a day is a possibility if we are not careful. AMA WA President Dr. Mark Duncan-Smith joined me for an exclusive discussion on the 30,000 cases scenario and why we shouldn't be complacent. Doctor, thanks for joining us. When it comes to 30,000 cases a day, what are the possibilities, or we can rest assured that it will be all fine, given that you say it will hit 25,000 very soon?
Look, I think it's a low probability. I think that if we really did show signs based on modelling that was going to occur, then I really would expect the government to step in. Our hospital system would quite simply not withstand that. We will struggle at 20,000. I think we're struggling even where we are right now. Now, we're at 17,000 cases per day over the last 2 days. Our hospitalisations are still at roughly 275, and that's what I expect. But what I'm concerned about is where the hospitalisations are in a week from now. That's when we're going to really be pushing the numbers well into the 300s. We may even crack 400 over the next week or two. Our medical system is buckling even as we speak, with numbers just under 300.
But if it does get close to 30,000 cases a day, what would a scenario look like?
I desperately hope that we just won't get there. Again, if we were actually looking at getting to that, I would expect the government to step in and actually reintroduce restrictions, mask wearing. We can't allow the number to get that high. If they really carried on with a let it rip scenario, then we may still not get there, because basically the number of people around who haven't had COVID isn't going to be that many. So we probably won't crack it. It's a possibility, but I certainly would expect us to either just not reach it or the government to intervene before we would look like hitting it.
So do you believe people can take a deep breath and rest assured while not being complacent?
No, we can't take a deep breath. We can't be complacent. We need to... I continue to wear masks indoors, as we did before the decision on April 29, and I highly recommend that to all of WA society. Unfortunately, the government's not willing to act for reasons I just do not understand, and all I can say is mask up voluntarily for WA, protect yourself, protect the community, and most importantly, at the moment, protect the medical system.
Dr. Duncan-Smith, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
Electricity, water and other household fees will increase again this financial year, as the McGowan government revealed the state budget this week. The $400 electricity credit will offset increases in other household fees and charges, reducing overall costs of $244, or 3.8% this financial year for West Australians. The WAMN News team broke down the budget details for you. Here is our combined report.
A strong state economy.
A proud WA Labor budget.
Making a helping hand possible for WA.
It helps families, workers and small businesses through the challenges of today and sets Western Australia up for tomorrow.
Economic success is highlighting Premier Mark McGowan's second budget as Treasurer, along with a desire to help counter WA's cost of living.
So no matter where you live across Western Australia, everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
It's revealed a staggering $5.7 billion surplus, pushing investment in diversification, health, climate change, infrastructure and the regions. But the centrepiece of the budget is a $400 once-off electricity credit to relieve the household pressure of power bills.
My WA Labor government is delivering real relief to Western Australians right across the state.
It's not all good news though. Household fees and charges set to rise. Electricity will go up 2.5% along with water, while car registrations will rise 3.8% and driver's licences 6.4% more, adding pressure to mums and dads. Meanwhile, concerns remain about WA's youth missing out, but the government says there's plenty for young people. It follows an exclusive WAMN news poll revealing our viewers' budget priority wish list. The top priorities were cost of living reduction including utilities, health funding including COVID-19 and hospitals, aged care, education and jobs, and housing. Advocacy groups have slammed the announcement, claiming it doesn't go far enough, especially for young people.
We believe there needs to be a more targeted approach for those vulnerable households and families.
We know that the income opportunities for young people are much less, the welfare benefits are much less, so $400 is a nice one-off, but it's not probably going to make much difference.
While unions claim the decision to keep public sector pay rises at 2.75% are pushing workers towards the streets.
Well, we think it needs to be urgently reviewed. It's clear the cost of living pressures are here to stay.
The opposition says the government has failed struggling Western Australians.
You don't get gold stars when you're failing to deliver on the basics.
And without dealing with its debt, it'll create bigger financial problems in the state in the future.
And at that rate, it will take 100 years to pay off the debt of this state.
Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
The federal election is in final countdown as we're days away from finding out who will lead Australia for the next 3 years.
The gaffes continued from Labor leader Anthony Albanese, and Pauline Hanson visited Western Australia. What are the things to look out for? Here is veteran political journalist Peter Kennedy's take on week 5 of the election campaign.
Well, we're getting to the pointy end of the election campaign with only a week or so to go. And there's a huge amount of pressure on the leaders, a huge amount of pressure on Scott Morrison. Can he perform another miracle? He did it 3 years ago. He'll need to perform a miracle this time because the Liberals are lagging in the opinion polls. So Anthony Albanese, the Labor leader, seems to have the rails run, but with 7 or so days to go, it's going to be unarmed combat right down to election day. Every point is going to be emphasised, every gaffe is going to be stressed, and there have been no holds barred. As far as the Liberals are concerned, it's the economy, it's jobs, it's defence, it's security. They're the issues that the Liberals are pushing to say that they are different from Labor, that they are better on these issues than Labor. As far as Labor is concerned, it's about health, it's about education, it's about jobs, and it's about wages. Labor claims that it can increase wages or oversee an increase in wages, which on the surface looks good. Naturally enough, wages haven't moved much in the last few years. But with the issue of inflation looming very large, cost of living looming very large, wages need to be handled very, very carefully, and the issue of productivity comes into it, and that's extremely important. Increased wages, increased productivity go hand in hand. Now, as far as the unseen or the quiet side of the election is concerned, it's the Senate. Do you know that there's going to be a Senate election? Each state needs to elect 6 senators. Who are they? Do you know who they are? I would imagine that very few people could name more than 2 or 3 of the Senate candidates who are putting themselves forward for election this time in Western Australia. And it raises the question: where are the Cormans this time round? Where are the Fred Cheneys? Where are the Willises? Where are the Duracs? Those sort of people, the Peter Walshes that have been major senators from Western Australia in the past. It's a very lacklustre field. And it's the quiet side of the election, and that I think is going to cause a lot of confusion. But just watch out for this. Pauline Hanson is visiting the West and spending more time in the West than she has in previous elections. The One Nation Party Senate ticket is headed by Paul Filing, a former Liberal member of the House of Representatives, a former police officer. The polling for One Nation has been higher than in the past, and the party believes it has a very good chance of returning a senator from Western Australia. Preferences, of course, will be vital in the Senate, as always, as also in House of Representatives seats. Seats like Swan and Pearce look as if they're lost to the Liberals this time and look like Labor gains. But in Curtin, it's gloves off. Between Kate Cheney from the Homes of Court Climate 200 group and Celia Hammond, the sitting Liberal member. Gloves off in Curtin, and it's going to be gloves off everywhere in Western Australia this coming week. Unarmed combat will be the key, and every gaffe will be emphasised right down to polling day on the 21st of May. Peter Kennedy, WAMN News.
The eponymous leader of political party Pauline Hanson's One Nation is hot on the election trail in Perth. After arriving in the city on Tuesday evening, Ms Hanson spent Wednesday morning in Cannington and the afternoon in Mandurah before attending a One Nation supporters dinner in West Perth. One Nation's candidate Paul Farling believes the party has a good chance of winning a seat in the Senate.
So I got ridiculed by the Premier of my own state at the time with regards to it. It was One Nation's push that we actually got the increase in the GST for Western Australia because it's fair. Any decisions that we make on the floor of Parliament is basically relates to the whole of Australia as a whole. Although I may be a Queensland senator, I am a national leader.
Well, firstly, what we're looking for is a Royal Commission into the handling of COVID by the federal and state governments. That's probably the most important thing as far as what's been happening in the last 2 years or so. But more importantly, we want to see a One Nation wants to see a fairer economy for all Australians, not just those that are in a position of influence.
This week on the WMN Extra News Club, as the cost of living continues to increase in Western Australia, our reporter Nelson Liu shared his views on whether the $400 electricity credit will be enough to shield households from the impact of fee increases, and if the 3.8% reduction can help people get ahead. We also feature a special report on the first Indigenous-focused radio election forum that was held on Noongar Radio this week. What is the political consensus for voters going forward?
We see a lot of forums happen at election time, but I don't think we see a lot, particularly here in WA, relating to First Nations issues. So we thought here at Noongar Radio that we can really fill that sort of a gap here, and it was taken up by First Nations radio stations right across Western Australia. So we had candidates running in Senate, and it was a WA relevant discussion, and that was broadcast into remote communities right across the state. It was broadcast into towns and cities from Perth up to Columbaroo and Karratha, everywhere in between, and we really were able to push the message that First Nations voters should not be taken for granted at this election.
You can read all that and more on the WMN Extra News Club. Subscribe to the link in the description and support independent journalism.
WA is boosting zero-emissions vehicles in the state budget, the state government has revealed. Under the scheme, the Clean Energy Car Fund will include $36.5 million to provide up to 10,000 rebates of $3,500 to people purchasing an electric or hydrogen fuel cell car of up to $70,000. It is expected to enable Western Australian drivers to save more than $1,400 a year on fuel costs. Replacing 10,000 petrol-fueled vehicles with electric or hydrogen vehicles is expected to reduce carbon emissions by at least 7,000 tonnes each year. WA will introduce a distance-based road user charge for zero and low emissions light vehicles from July 1, 2027 to ensure all motorists pay their fair share towards maintenance and construction of WA roads. It will involve a base rate of 2.5 cents per kilometre for electric and hydrogen vehicles and 2 cents per kilometre for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, with both rates indexed to CPI.
Crimes in remote areas will be better monitored, with police launching trial technology via mobile devices and vehicles. The new technology will better equip officers on the ground with information to deal with crime or seek a missing person at risk in a faster time. Other advantages include real-time information and data flow between incident and command centres, multiple agencies' information response, better data capacity and enhanced public communications. Police say Meekatharra Police Station and the Burungara multifunctional police facility both currently each have a vehicle involved in the trial.
Groundbreaking research is underway in NASA as scientists used moon soil samples to grow plants before astronauts return to the moon. Surface material called regolith were brought back to Earth, with scientists studying them using state-of-the-art equipment. These research projects are vital as NASA is working to grow and develop food sources for future astronauts operating in deep space. The breakthrough discovery hopes to increase future astronauts' stay in the moon or possibly in Mars, despite moon soil plants being less robust compared to Earth's soil. Scientists are working to grow nutrient-dense plants on the moon and help future astronauts live well in deep space. Speaking about growing food sources, I do wonder how would it be like to cook in space, Melly?
I think it would certainly be a challenge and much easier to cook down here than up there.
Yes. Obviously, we need gravity's help to make sure everything's plopped on the ground without oil flying in our faces. We'll recap this week's top stories again in just a moment.
But right now, here is Nelson Liu with Western Perspective.
Thanks, Ivan and Melly. Hello and welcome to WP. Well, the long-running election campaign has entered its final week, all coming to an end next weekend after 5 weeks, 3 live television debates and all the gaffes in front of the media. Scott Morrison's Liberal Party is fighting hard to retain government, but Labor leader Anthony Albanese has a good chance of snatching the top job, according to polls and public opinion. Attorney General and Liberal Senator Michaelia Cash joined us for an extensive interview as the final countdown to polling officially begins.
3, 2, 1. Senator, thanks for your time today.
It's always great to be with you, Ivan, and hello to your listeners.
Thank you. This is going to be a very tough campaign, but before we get to that, Mr. Albanese has stuff up again last week. We didn't have the opportunity to ask you, what do you think about his NDIS, the fact that he has to put his hand down from the advisors to get the nooks? What do you reckon?
Well, this is allegedly a signature policy for the Labor Party, and the leader of the opposition, the person putting themselves forward as the future Prime Minister of Australia, when asked a very simple question, was unable to explain it. But this is not the first time, Ivan, that we've seen a gaffe from the leader of the opposition. He couldn't recall, or did not know, even worse, what Australia's unemployment rate was at 4%. What does that say? Well, he certainly hasn't been following the Australian labour market for the last 2 years then, has he? But also, recently what we have seen is Mr Albanese yet again making up economic policy on the run. As you know, the Fair Work Commission is currently undertaking the analysis of what the minimum wage should be. No government or opposition has ever put a figure on what the Fair Work Commission should do. And under pressure from a journalist yesterday, Mr Albanese blurts out an actual figure of 5.1%. Mr Albanese needs to clearly explain to the Australian people, what is the underlying evidence in relation to this figure? Where did that evidence come from? Did you actually undertake a considered analysis of all of the underlying conditions? Because the answer clearly is no. But also, Mr Albanese, why have you and Labor failed to date to put in a submission to the Fair Work Commission? The role of government is to put in a submission which clearly sets out all of the factors that the Fair Work Commission needs to take into account. It is then for the Fair Work Commission to undertake the considered analysis and then provide its decision. What we saw on display yet again yesterday was Mr Albanese, absolutely no plan for Australia's economy, but put under pressure from a journalist, blurting out a figure, but with no underlying evidentiary basis.
But the thing is that the voters doesn't seem to buy your argument, because the polls hasn't changed, hasn't moved one bit since several weeks ago. What does it
Well, again, I would say the only poll that counts, and I've always been, Ivan, a big believer in this, is the poll on Election Day. And we will be working right up until Election Day to really highlight the clear choice that Australians have, the clear choice that does have real consequences for the Australian people. Do you want Scott Morrison and the Liberal team, a strong economy and a clear plan for an even stronger future, or? And the or is being highlighted more and more on a daily basis. Mr Albanese never held a financial portfolio, 25 years plus in the Parliament, and his own party have never deemed him fit to run a financial portfolio. That's like saying to a long-term employee, thanks for your loyal service, but as an employer, I'm never ever letting you go near the till. I'm never ever letting you go near the books. And yet Mr Albanese wants to run this country. Again, the choice is becoming clearer, Ivan, on a daily basis. And this latest gaffe just shows you there is no economic plan for Australia. He's making it up on the run. But what is worse, put under pressure from a journalist, he blurts out a figure, but can't explain where the figure came from, other than one factor. That's not good enough.
What do you think of Anita's front page on the newspaper today?
Oh, well, clearly there are questions to be answered. I mean, let's just remember, there has never been a tax that in particular Mr Albanese hasn't advocated for and hasn't had a delight in actually implementing when given the chance in government. Zanita needs to come clean, in particular with the electors of Swan. Does she support a carbon tax? Does she support a mining tax? Voters need to know where she stands on these two issues. Because as we know, a carbon tax is a tax on your job. A carbon tax is a tax on employers. Does she support a carbon tax? Because it would appear from the front page of the West Australian, yes, she does. Well, she needs to come clean with the voters of Swan and clearly outline her position. But given also the importance of the resources industry to Western Australia, the fact that Mr Albanese, last time he was in government, imposed a mining tax on Western Australia, that's a tax on your job, that is a tax on jobs of Western Australians. Does she also support a mining tax?
There's some Liberal voters have been voting for Liberals for the entire life, saying it's time for a change, we're voting for someone else. Doesn't that concern you that this seems to be the trend in this election?
Oh, well, again, I disagree. Every day that I've been out there talking to people, and in particular the last few days on pre-poll, I've had people actively coming up to me and saying what we now need more than ever is the continuation of a strong government. They want a government that has a clear plan for the economy. They want a government that understands the best form of welfare is a job. People understand that the Morrison team, they've made decisions, in particular in the last 2 years, to protect the lives and livelihoods of Australians. They understand that when it comes to national security, a Morrison-led government will always put the security of Australia and Australians as a priority. That's the feedback I'm getting on the ground. But again, for those who are potentially thinking about the choice, because there are certainly some people who have not made up their mind. That is reflected, as we know, in around 25% of the Australian population. There's always a percentage on voting day that are making up their mind on voting day. This election is about a choice, and it's about a choice that will have real consequences for the Australian people. Think about that choice. Do you want the stronger economy? Scott Morrison, a clear plan for Australia's future, or Mr Anthony Albanese? They have a history of weaker economies, higher taxes. Australia does not need that, in particular at this point in time.
Is the Liberal Party under attack?
When you say under attack, what do you mean by that?
Kill independence.
Oh, well, again, I think for us, the choice...
Up on you?
No, I think the choice is clear, and that's our role each and every day, to be out there. I mean, you look at the underlying figures. Unemployment at 4%. We are one of the few countries in the world to have maintained a AAA credit rating. Our economy is the envy of so many others. When you look at the decisions we made to protect the lives of Australians, the decisions we made saved tens of thousands of lives. You look at the impact of JobKeeper, the fact that it sustained employees throughout COVID to maintain that important connection with the employers. You look at where we are on national security. Again, that's our role, is to be out there each and every day talking to the Australian people and explaining to them what that clear choice is.
And now, here's AMA WA spokesman Dr Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time. As we head into the federal election week, getting the impression that Western Australians are starting to realise that this is not going to be over in a short peak and COVID will be gone and we're just back to 2019. And that's going to be a bit of a difficult realisation and adjustment period for a lot of people, that the disruption that comes from living with the virus is in fact going to be quite disabling to the community for the foreseeable future, not just in the health system, But as people fall sick or need to isolate across the community, this is going to have an ongoing and rolling effect on all of us. And of course, the best thing we can do to mitigate that is to reduce transmission where we can by wearing good quality masks, particularly when we're in public and indoors, and being very careful to stay at home if we're sick, and to continue to RAT test and PCR test when appropriate. And also to think about ventilation of buildings, and the Health Department have put out an excellent document now about how buildings should be ventilated to ensure that there's fresh air indoors and we're flushing the virus out whenever possible. The virus, of course, continues to mutate to get around the vaccines that we currently have, and we do need to update those vaccines over the next year or so, and we'll have to have further boosters as time goes by. But ventilation and good masks, of course, will work against any variant of the virus to reduce transmission, which is good news. So we're sitting just under the 300 mark for hospitalisation. We would expect that to increase in the next little while as we've been hitting record case numbers, and certainly not unrealistic that we would be seeing the figures of 30,000 cases a day in the next little while as this continues to spread through the community, having only affected probably 20% of the population at the most so far. Wherever possible, if kids are in classes where there's COVID around, it would be good for them to be wearing masks, and the Telethon Kids Institute has some excellent guidelines on their website about how to go about that and encourage children through it. And we're reassured by the developmental paediatricians in Western Australia who are telling us that there's no impact whatsoever on kids' development, and even in fact some kids with learning speech do better when they have to sound out their words more clearly because they don't have the visual cues there. So whilst it's inconvenient, it's still one of the cheapest, easiest, safest ways of reducing viral transmission in the community. So enjoy your trip to the polling booth safely next Saturday. Wear a mask when you're going to be indoors there, and it'll be really interesting to see what the community wants to do about our government over the next 4 years. Thanks very much for your time.
And that's WP for this week. We'll be back again next time, but for now, it's back to you, Ivan and Melly.
Thanks, Nelson. And now, here's Darby with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks guys. Tonight on 6 News, less than a week to go until Australia decides, with PM Scott Morrison officially launching the government's re-election campaign, but the Liberals may be about to lose a number of key seats based on leaked polling that could end up swinging the election. Plus, 6 News reveals our own polling that shows a large amount of support for minor parties and independents, and strong predictions of a hung parliament. And we speak to Georgia Steele, the independent aiming to take the New South Wales seat of Hughes from Craig Kelly. You can see the full details on those stories and much more on our YouTube channel. Just search 6 News Australia to find us, or our website 6newsau.com. For now though guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Darby, and that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly and myself, we wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.